Well, thank you for being here. Thank you, Green Festival. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, everybody, for making this happen. We are in a time of amazing revolution. I think this is perhaps the greatest revolution that human beings have ever known. Bigger than the Industrial Revolution or the Agricultural Revolution. It's bigger than the American Revolution. This is a revolution in consciousness. We are changing. And it's a very exciting time. Is this one working?
Yeah.
Can you hear me with this one? I kind of like to walk around actually.
Yeah.
Is that all right? Good. So, I just wanted to share with you something kind of humorous that happened. A few months ago, I was at a Green Festival in Washington, D.C. Maybe it was 6 months ago, I don't remember. But the night before, I was at a reception with a bunch of pretty high-up people from the U.S. State Department. And as we were sitting there, and one of them asked me in front of a group of them, "So why are you in Washington right now?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to speak at the Green Festival." And he said, "Oh my gosh, I'm Irish. Maybe I should be there." So much for the State Department and Green.
Yeah.
So, as Alyssa just mentioned, I was recently, within the last month, I've been in Vietnam, which I spent 10 years of my life trying to avoid going to, and did avoid going to at that time. And then Myanmar and Thailand. Came back home to Seattle and spent a couple of days there, and then went on to Istanbul in the Middle East. And one of the things that struck me so strongly was what an amazing world that we're living in today. So these countries like Vietnam, who we were trying desperately to conquer, to make it capitalistic, to fight communism, today is one of the most capitalistic countries in the world. They won the war, and they're extremely capitalistic, and they're not our enemies. The domino effect never happened. We were told that if we lost Vietnam, the whole of Southeast Asia would go communist and be extremely bad and violent and a great threat to us. Of course, that hasn't happened. On the other hand, after that, I went to the Middle East. And here we find an extremely troubled spot in the world. But once again, so much of it is the message that we're presented with. You know, it's about oil, it's about the dollar, it's about the sort of things that I did as an economic hitman. But I think what's the most wonderful, positive thing about all of this is that we are beginning to get it. We're waking up. There is a revolution in consciousness. That's why we're having a Green Festival. That's why we're here. We, the people, are beginning to really wake up, and we're seeing this all over the planet. In the Middle East, we got the Arab Spring, which has had a phenomenal effect. Despite what we may be told here now, it is changing things in a big way. There still needs to be a lot more changes, but it's happening. We've had the Occupy movement here, which has had a major impact. It's received tremendous attention. It's been a great way of getting the message out. It is happening. And we're seeing demonstrations against Putin in Russia. And in China, we're seeing demonstrations. In Latin America, we've seen a democratic revolution where 10 countries in the last decade have democratically voted in progressive leaders who are standing up to the big corporations, who are saying, if you're going to take our oil, we need to let you take our oil, but we want our share of the profits from that oil. We're seeing amazing changes. Every one of these 10 countries in Latin America that is standing up to the corporatocracy during most of my lifetime, every one of those 10 countries was ruled by a brutal dictator for most of my lifetime. That dictator was put into power in most cases and kept there by the CIA. That's all changed. We are experiencing a major change in the world today. This is the most revolutionary time, I believe, in human history. And a couple of really important factors here. One, for the first time in the history of the planet, every being, every sentient being, every life form on this planet is facing the same crisis. This never happened before. New York might face blizzards, and Florida might face hurricanes, and parts of Southeast Asia might face tsunamis. But they didn't really have a big effect on anywhere else. Well, today, every life form on this planet is is facing global climate change. The climate is changing, there's no doubt about it. The glaciers are melting, the oceans are rising. Resources are declining at accelerating rates. Populations are exploding among some species like ours, and other species are going extinct very, very rapidly. So, huge crises that are impacting all of us, and this is brand new. And for the first time in human history, we all have the capability of communicating with each other through the internet, streaming, texting, cell phones. It's incredible the amount of communications that goes on. So I was just in Southeast Asia. When I was there in the 70s, it could take 2 or 3 days to make a phone call to Boston from a place like Jakarta, Indonesia, or any place in Vietnam or Thailand. It could take a tremendous amount of time to make a phone call, and then in the middle of the phone call you might be cut off. It was very sketchy. Today, I can get online and instantaneously send a whole book to myself or somebody else around the world. A few years ago, I was high in the Himalayan mountains with a tribal chieftain there. We were about 16,000, 17,000 feet up next to a glacier, and he was lamenting the fact, this chieftain, that his people would never have telephones because the lines would never reach that far. You don't need lines anymore. I talked to him about 6 months ago. He was on a satellite cell phone. Same thing deep in the Amazon. So we're communicating with each other across this planet. Not everybody has a cell phone or texting machine, but an awful lot of people do. And everybody technically has the capability of making that happen. This is huge. It is having a huge impact. But we also have to recognize, and when I was recently in Istanbul, I was meeting with a young man from Syria who is in charge of Al Jazeera's social networking department in Turkey. So here's a young man, 27 years old, in charge of social networking for Al Jazeera. And he's telling me, you know, he says, one of my greatest worries is that everybody's texting. Everybody's on social media, and nobody's taking action. And I'm afraid that that's going to be a distraction. He said the word is out that it was Facebook that caused the Arab Spring. He said it was not Facebook that caused the Arab Spring. Facebook helped to get it organized a little bit, but what caused the Arab Spring was people taking to the streets. Action. We must take action. And so as part of this revolution, it's about action, and I want to encourage every one of you to every single day take some action. We must create a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. We have that opportunity. For the first time in human history, we really have this opportunity. But we have to take action. And every one of us can do something along these lines. You know, I don't know what your passion is, but I know you have passion. I don't know what skill sets you have, but I know you have skills. I have a passion for writing, and hopefully some talent in it. So that's where I focus my energies. But wherever your passion is, wherever your talents are, your skills, do something every day to encourage us all to create a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. Send an email, or do something, take to the streets, and let's make this happen. So I just want to say, I think that we've reached a time where we're sick and tired of the robber barons getting tax breaks, paying no taxes. Exxon made $46 billion 2 years ago and paid no taxes. This year they got a tax rebate. They also paid a few taxes, then they got a tax rebate. GE almost never pays taxes. Bank of America doesn't pay taxes. Do you pay taxes?
No.
Why shouldn't they pay taxes?
Yes, yes.
Are you fed up with this?
Yeah!
Are you going to change it?
Yeah!
Not with that kind of energy. Are you going to change it?
Yeah!
Are you going to change it?
Yeah!
Yes, we are going to change it. It's got to be us.
That's
That's
right.
why we're here today.
You said it.
How did we get here?
Laziness.
Most of you probably already know the story and maybe sick of hearing it if you've watched YouTube or seen me speak before, but I think I'm in an interesting place to speak about how we get to a global economy that's a failure. We are in collapse. There's no question. We are in collapse. The title of the speech is Collapse the Prophecies of You. I sort of get to the you first. We're going to get to the prophecies in a minute. The collapse, you know, we have created a global economy that is absolutely not working. And one of many signs is that less than 5% of us live in the United States and we consume more than 25% of the world's resources. While half the world is in dire poverty, starving or close to starvation. That's a failure. It's a failed system. It's the only way you can describe it. It's not a model. You can't repeat this in India or China or Latin America. Those places might want to replicate what we've done, but they can't possibly do it. 5% consuming 25%, you can't expand that model. It's untenable. And on top of that, we are really run by what I would call a death economy. An economy that's based on killing people. Over 20% of the U.S. official budget is spent on the military, and that doesn't include Homeland Security, the CIA, the NSA, any of those other outside organizations. If we included those, it would be more like 35%. And then if we included all the spin-offs that come from those, the people who supply food, insurance, health care, so on and so forth, it would be like more than 50% of our budget goes to supporting death, killing. And another large percent goes to ravaging the earth, digging it up, tearing it apart, stealing its resources. That's a death economy. It's time now. So that's a collapse. We're in this collapsed world. It's time now to move into what we might call a life economy. Let's encourage the same companies that are currently destroying the earth, creating weapons and bombs. Let's encourage them and new entrepreneurs to create companies that will clean up the terrible pollution of this planet. The air, the water, the soil pollution. And let's encourage some of our bad food companies. And man, we got some bad food companies. Anybody here in love with Monsanto or? No. So we got some food companies that we could encourage. And again, entrepreneurs, college students, people coming into the business world to instead of creating GMOs and more pesticides and herbicides, to instead find ways to help starving people in the world produce food more efficiently, distribute it, store it and distribute it more efficiently. Better transportation systems, better communication systems. We need new banking systems. We need to get rid of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
And replace it with a new banking system. We're headed in that direction. Over 20 states in the United States right now are looking at following the North Dakota model of a bank that really works for the people. We need a central bank that does that, not the kind we have now with the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
There's so much we can do. But we're in this collapse situation and we need to get out of it. How did we get to this collapse? Well, I think again, I can take some of the credit, sorry to say, for the collapse. I was an economic hitman. What do economic hitmen do? Well, a lot of things. But perhaps the generic version is that we will identify a country that has resources that corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country. Things like power plants and industrial parks and highways that benefit a few very wealthy families in those countries, but not the majority of the people. They're too poor to buy electricity, can't get jobs in industrial parks because they don't hire many people, have no cars to drive on the highways. And yet, they are left holding a huge debt that they can't repay. So at some point we go back and say, hey, since you can't pay your debts, sell your resource, your oil or whatever, real cheap to our oil companies. Or vote with us on the next critical United Nations vote. Or allow us to build a military base on your soil. And in the few cases where we fail, the jackals come in. Where people like I am unable to convince the leaders of countries to buy into the system, jackals come in who either overthrow the governments or assassinate the leaders. And I talk in my books about my personal experience in Ecuador with Jaime Roldos, democratically elected president of Ecuador, Omar Torrijos in Panama. They wouldn't buy into the system. They had too much integrity, and they were both assassinated by CIA-sponsored jackals. And in the few cases where the jackals fail, like with Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, then the military goes in. So this is a system that we have that's brought us here. And one of the things that I want to emphasize is that this is not really a government system. None of this is acting on your behalf. It's not for the people. This is for corporations. It's really a corporate system. So we moved from a time
what some so-called
roughly 200 years ago or more, where religious organizations controlled the world's economies and geopolitics, to a time when governments controlled them, more recently, to now a time when it's the big corporations. Our government is a servant of big corporations. Absolutely. Corporations own most of our elected officials because they finance their campaigns. And our elected officials are very, very vulnerable. You know, it isn't Obama's fault that he has to hire people from Goldman Sachs and Monsanto to run his financial side or his agricultural side. He wouldn't have become president had he not bought into the system. And a guy like Obama or anybody else high up in politics knows that he can be taken down very quickly. Today you don't need a gun. In Kennedy's time you needed a gun. Today all you need is a rumor of a scandal. It doesn't even have to be a real scandal. A rumor can bring a man down, especially if the rumor is spread by the press and the FBI. These are vulnerable times for our elected officials. And so they very much are the servants of the big corporations. But the good news here is that you and I have control over the corporations. They only survive, they only thrive because we buy from them. The marketplace is a democracy if we choose to accept it that way. So every time you buy something or decide not to, you're casting a vote. And I would suggest that that vote is more powerful than the vote you cast once every 2 years or 4 years in the polls, because you're doing it frequently. So here we are at this time when we can take over, when we can show these corporations, let them know we're not going to buy from the ones that are not creating a sustainable world. We're only going to buy from the ones that are headed in that direction.
People keep buying from corporations. Same vicious circle over and over again. They go to the mall.
So this time that we're in, which I find fascinating, has been prophesized by indigenous cultures around the world for centuries. There's so many prophecies. I started working with indigenous cultures in 1968 when I was sent into the Amazon by the Peace Corps. And since then I've worked with indigenous cultures on every continent where they exist, which doesn't include Antarctica, but everywhere else. And every single one of the cultures I've worked with has a prophecy that we have now entered a time with the potential for tremendous transformation. And we're feeling that time now, and I'd like to just share a couple of those prophecies with you that represent maybe the bigger ones. And most of us are aware of the prophecy, the Mayan prophecy of 2012. So we just had that this last December. I was with a group of people I'd taken to Guatemala to be with the Mayans on that date, December 21st, 2012. And incidentally, I'm taking another group down in December this year, and for the first year of the birthing of this new era that we're in, it'll be very powerful working with these indigenous shamans, the Mayan shamans, fire ceremonies, incredible experiences. And I would invite you all to join me. Go to my website, johnperkins.org, and come. It's a great trip. Guatemala, beautiful, beautiful country, active volcanoes, incredible jungle. We stay out in this jungle, beautiful hotel in the jungle next to Tikal, where there's 3 jaguar families living amongst us and lots of howler monkeys and spider monkeys. So go to johnperkins.org, this thing called Trips. And while you're there, please sign up for my newsletter. You have to actually put in your email address. It comes out about once a month. So the Mayan prophecy says that we have entered a time now where we're open to incredible change. So the Mayans talk about the last period of time, the last 5,125 years. That period ended this past December. And that was a period that, according to the Popol Vuh, their most sacred text, the Popol Vuh tells the story of a king who's also a god, whose name is Seven Macaw. And he's characterized by brutality, exploitation, selfishness. And he is killed, he's decapitated by the hero twins, a boy and a girl, and replaced by Hunahpu, a new ruler, a new god, who's characterized by compassion, cooperation, selflessness, spirituality. And when they cut off his head, they throw it in this basket. And so the Mayans tell us that what this represents is getting rid of the old paradigm, the old time of brutality, selfishness, materialism, and replacing it with the new time of compassion, cooperation. And the reason that December 21st, 2012 was important was because at that moment, the sun entered the center of the great rift of the Milky Way, the center of the Milky Way. And it had been prophesied for more than 5,000 years by the Mayan that would happen on December 21st, 2012. And the sun going into the great rift of the Milky Way is symbolic of the head of Seven Macaw being thrown into the basket. So at that moment, we got rid of the old paradigm, and now we're birthing the new paradigm. Well, I want to say that the Mayans have these ball courts, where they have this ball game that they play. And on some of the most important ball courts, there's a throne, a stone throne, where the shaman sits. And if you sit in that stone throne, I was told, look straight down the end of the ball court, and exactly the opposite end is where the sun would rise on December 22nd, 2012. And I did this. I sat in that throne in the mid-70s with the shaman, and I said, oh my God, the sun's rising right in the center now. I didn't think that's supposed to happen in 2012. And he said, well, the sun's very large. And so it looks like it's rising in the center, but actually it doesn't rise in the center, actually, theoretically, until 2012. But what this is telling us is that this shift in paradigm, this shift from the old world of Seven Macaw to the new world of Hunahpu has already begun. This is back in the 70s. And it will continue for a number of years after 2012. December 21st, 2012 is just a marker point. It's just a day of celebrations, of ceremonies. But the big day, he said, we'll be celebrating on 2013, which we'll be doing. I hope some of you will be with me. 2014 and 2015 and so on. We're going to make this happen. But this is the time to get rid of the old paradigm of brutality, exploitation, selfishness, and replace it with an openness to compassion. And another prophecy, which is similar, comes from the Andes, the Amazon, the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. How many of you know that prophecy? Are you Pachamama people? Yes, a lot of you are. So you hear that Pachamama Alliance, a nonprofit I founded. Go to pachamama.org, treechange.org. So the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, we don't know when it was first spoken, but probably more than 2,000 years ago. And back when this prophecy was first spoken, it was said then, back in the midst of history, human beings, human societies would take two different paths. One would be the path of the eagle, which they said was the path of the brain, the mind, rationality, science, industrialization, the things that go along with that. We might call that the male path. And the other part of human societies would take the path of the condor, path of the heart, of feeling, of emotions, intuition, passion. Might call that the feminine path. And it was said that for the first 3 Pachacutis, and a Pachacuti is a 500-year interval, for the first 3 Pachacutis, these 2 paths would be totally separate. But in the 4th Pachacuti, they would come together. And the eagle would be so strong that it would practically drive the condor out of extinction. The 4th Pachacuti began, according to our calendar, in about 1500. And of course, we know that's what happened. 1492, Columbus. After that, the condor peoples of the world were practically driven into extinction by the eagle peoples of the world, the industrial people. But not quite. The prophecy says that in the 5th Pachacuti, 500 years later, roughly the year 2000, the opportunity would arise for the eagle and the condor to fly together in one sky, to soar, to dance, to mate, and to create a new offspring, which would be a higher level of consciousness, bringing mind and heart together, science, industry, with art, and passion, and emotion, male and female, coming together to create a new form of consciousness. And we're seeing that happen, beginning in the 1990s is when we began to open up to shamanism. I've written a number of books, 5 books on shamanism, which are also available here. We're doing a book signing on the economic books here, but I've already signed the shaman books at the Inner Tradition stall down there if you want to go there. So, bringing these 2 things together, and incidentally, Barbara Marx Hubbard, some of you may know, a wonderful lady, and I'm going to be doing a workshop at Omega on this very subject in August. Omega has a booth here too. So come join us there. So the eagle and the condor coming together, the opportunity is there. But none of these prophecies say it will happen. They say we, the people, must make it happen. The hero twins, men and women, we have to make it happen. We have to cut off the head of the old regime. We have to bring the eagle and condor together. Because the old regime, the leaders are not going to cut off their own heads. We have to do it. We have to make the change. And we're going to do it. Are we? Are you going to do it?
Yeah!
Are you going to do it?
Yeah!
No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to inspire you to do it. And I'll be with you. We'll all do it together. We'll all do it together, but don't look to any leaders. What about doing it? I'll get your back. Okay. So these prophecies are all telling us that we have to do it. We the people, it's our time to do this. Prophecy of the eagle and the condor. And another prophecy, we know the prophecy of the age of Aquarius, where we move out of an old paradigm that's represented by limitation, lack, and we move into a time when we know there's abundance. We may be running out of oil, hopefully, but certainly the environment's running out of the carrying capacity to burn fossil fuels, but there's plenty of sunshine. There's plenty of energy out there. There's plenty of everything. There's plenty of food. 5% of us in the United States consume 25% of the world's resources. It's not a shortage of resources. It's a shortage of mindset. It's a shortage of it's how we distribute it. One other prophecy I just want to mention.
Common sense.
Is the prophecy of the Himalayas. Because it's quite different from these. We've talked about 2 prophecies that come from the Americas. The prophecy of the Himalayas says that the 14th Dalai Lama will be the last. Well, this one that we have right now is the 14th. And I've always wondered, what does that mean? And a few years ago, I was leading a group of people, 30 people, to Ladakh, up in the north of India. And as we flew out of Ladakh to Jammu, India, we were waiting in the airport. There was a group like what we take to Guatemala, about 30 people. And as we were waiting in the airport to leave, the Dalai Lama and his entourage walked into the airport, and he's carrying my book, Shapeshifting, which is for sale back here in the Traditions. And it was amazing that he was carrying this book. There's a story behind that, but I can't get into it now. There's not enough time. But one of the people in our group went up to his secretary and said, you know that the author of that book is here. Anyway, to make a long story short, the Dalai Lama invites me to sit next to him in the front seat of the airplane for the next hour, flying out of Ladakh into India. And as we're doing this, we had a lot of conversations, but one of them I said, so Your Holiness, you know about the prophecy that says that you're the last. And he says, oh yes, I know. And I said, well, what do you make of that? Who's coming next? And he said, I don't know for sure, but I think the next Dalai Lama may not be from the Himalayas. It may be another similar, but not from the Himalayas, and maybe not even Buddhist. This kind of shocked me. And I said, well, where do you think he might be from, or she? And he said, she or he might come from the Amazon or Andes. That's why I'm reading your book, Shapeshifting, because I'm very interested in the people that you hung out with in the Amazon and Andes. And this really blew my mind. Like, I know a lot of people in the Amazon and Andes, but none of them know anything about the dakinis and gods and goddesses, all the stuff that goes into Buddhism. And so I was pretty stunned by all of this. But so as a result of that flight, he invited our group of 30 people to visit him in his home in Dharamsala, India, a few days later. And we went, of course. Wouldn't you go? Yes. So we spent the afternoon in his living room with the Dalai Lama, and he opens everything up to questions. But before, when we first started, he came out into the room, he welcomes us all, and the first thing he says to us, he says, I have one important thing to say to you. Don't become a Buddhist. The world doesn't need any more Buddhists. But, he said, do practice the Buddhist principles of compassion, cooperation, and love. And then I got it, you know, like,
you don't need to follow
so
religion.
what he's really saying is the next Dalai Lama might have to come from a place that doesn't know anything about Buddhism, but knows about
Basic
compassion
stuff.
and love and cooperation. It is not all the gods and goddesses. It isn't. And I know that he's pretty fed up with the male hierarchy of the Buddhists that get going for them there too. There's a lot of things. So this was another fascinating prophecy that had a new slant to it. And he was very clear to say the next Dalai Lama, she or he, might come from the Amazon and Andes. And I think one of the important things of all these prophecies is the role of women. That every one of these prophecies makes a point that women have to come up in a more powerful position. That we have to bring up that condor side of us a lot more. That the receptivity that characterizes women, the nurturing aspects,
Have you read the
so
Chalice
important
and the
for us to
Blade?
bring forward.
It's a
You
book
women,
you need to read. I mean,
take it over, take the power.
everything he's talking about,
Take
deeper.
command. You know, we men have not done a very good job, I have to say. So you women, it's your time. But you may have to take it because men may not give it up too easily.
Of course, because
I
of
will. But I don't know about these
because of
other
the,
guys.
you know, the patriarchal
And,
mentality
you know,
and paradigm
as we
we
go
live in.
back to
Yeah,
this
that's what it is.
conversation about taking control over corporations. So the great
In
hope
this
of the world
culture,
now,
women
I
are
think,
supposed
is
to
that
be
we go from a
dominating.
time when religious organizations controlled to a time when it was governments and now it's corporations. The next time, what we're entering now is us. We the people take control. And I think women are going to play such a huge role in this, already are. And one important aspect of all of this, and I don't want to sound trivial, but it's extremely important, is that you women do most of the shopping for all of us. And the way you shop, the companies you choose to buy from, or the companies you choose not to buy from, is extremely important. And it's also important to communicate with them. So we've been sending a message to companies that we want cheap jackets and clothes and tennis shoes, and if they just happen to be made in sweatshops by slaves in Indonesia, we'll just look the other way.
That's the problem.
We want cheap petroleum for our cars, and if that means destroying the Amazon rainforest, we'll just look the other way. We must change this, and we must send them a new message, that we want to create a world that my 5-year-old grandson will want to inherit. And the only way he's going to inherit a sustainable, just, peaceful world is if every child on this planet inherits that same world. This has never been true before. We used to only have to take care of the United States. And now we have to recognize that we're living on a very fragile spacecraft, all of us together. Unlike the space station that our astronauts build, this one doesn't have any shuttles. You can't get off. My grandson won't be able to get off.
He's talking
We have
guys.
to fix it. And so we need to send this message to these corporations Every time you shop or don't shop, you're casting a ballot. But it's important to also send the emails to these corporations to let them know. Let them know. Get the message out. So here we are at this amazing time in human history. And one of the things that indigenous cultures teach us, they say that you were born at this particular time in human history to the parents you were born to the location you were born to, because you have a mission. And you, us, all of us here today, were born at this time because we have a mission to bring forth these prophecies, to create this new world, to cut off the head of the old paradigm that's so destructive and brutal, and to welcome the new paradigm, which is about compassion and love and cooperation. This is our time. This is your time. Are you ready for it?
Yeah!
Are you really ready for it?
Yeah! I'm like, I've been ready forever.
And I want you just to feel the power that you have.
Yes.
You have incredible power. Every one of us does. Don't for a moment feel powerless. You know, I'm often struck by how as a kid growing up in rural New Hampshire, I had no idea that African Americans had to ride on the back of a bus until Rosa Parks taught me. She walked to the front of a bus. She did other things too. But that taught me something amazing. Who the hell was Rosa Parks? She was a seamstress, a member of the NYC, and she changed the world. And I had no idea that the DDT my dad and I were spraying on the swamp behind our house in New Hampshire to kill mosquitoes was also killing fish and birds, until Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring and started a whole worldwide environmental movement. Who the hell was Rachel Carson? She's you. You can do that. You can walk to the front of a bus. You can start to write a book or whatever it is that your passion is. Rachel Carson was just a woman who one day sat down at a little wobbly desk in Pennsylvania and started to scribble out a book that she had no idea would ever be published. Forget about that, it would end up changing the world. You can do that. You have that power. We all have that power. And we all can take different routes. I don't know what your route is. I don't know what your passion is, what your skills are, as I said before, but I know you've got them. Do you have passion?
Yeah!
Come on, do you have passion?
Yeah!
All right. Do you have skills? Yes, you do. We all do. And we can take many different paths. Again, growing up in rural New Hampshire, I had no idea. No, let me say that differently. Growing up in rural New Hampshire, I had an important idea about the American Revolution. I was a student of the American Revolution. I have ancestors that fought in it. And I was very fascinated by it. And one of the things that I was most struck by is how grateful we need to be that George Washington did not try to write pamphlets. And Tom Paine did not try to lead men in armies. Washington had a passion and talent for leading men. Paine had a passion and talent for writing pamphlets. Martha Washington had a passion and talent for organizing women to make clothes and bullets for the men of the forefront. They took many different routes, many different paths, but they were all headed for the same destination, getting out from under the British yoke. We can take many different paths. So what I want to leave you with here today is this idea that we truly are in revolutionary times. These are times that have been prophesied by every indigenous culture that I know of around the globe. We have been told that we've entered these times. These are revolutionary times, and you have the power. So let's all follow our passions and use our talents. They can all be very different. But let's all head for the same destination of creating a world my 5-year-old grandson, whose name is Grant, will want to inherit. And that means every child on this planet will want to inherit that world. Let's all take our individual passions and talents and head toward a sustainable, just and peaceful world, the one that the prophecies have told us about. Are you ready to do that?
Hell yeah.
I'm ready to do it too. I think it's going to be an incredible time. And incidentally, there's nothing you can do that's more fun. There's nothing you can do that's more blessed than to feel that you're working to make a better world. It's about time we really did that. My generation, especially the men of my generation, have done a pretty damn poor job. But now it's time to turn that around, and I'm glad we're beginning to see how we're coming around to that. So I want to end by reading a quote. If I can find it here. And I have a little note here just to remind you all to come to Guatemala with me in December. And the Omega Workshop in August. JohnPerkins.org. So this quote is from President Obama's acceptance speech, November 6, 2012.
Oh, brother.
Whether you were for Obama or not, or whether you're for him now or not, I think the words are very poignant. America has never been about what can be done for us. It's about what can be done by us together. I have always believed that hope is that stubborn thing inside us that insists, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us, so long as we have the courage to keep reaching, to keep working, to keep fighting. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us, so long as we have the courage to keep reaching, to keep working, to keep fighting. I think that's why we're all here together today, so that we can go out together and have fun, as well as courage, to keep reaching, keep working, keep fighting, so that we can create a world that when my 5-year-old grandson is my age 6 decades from now, he's going to look back and say, thank God those people came together at the Green Festival in New York in April 2013, and every one of them committed to taking some action every single day to making a better world. I look forward to taking those actions with you, and thank you very much. I'll be signing books over here, and there's books back there that I've already signed for the shamanic books.
Ladies and gentlemen, a great green thank you to John Perkins. I'd like to make 3 invitations to you.
Are you going to interview
The
him
first
now?
invitation is, if you'd like to talk with John and get one of his books, he'll be right over here.